Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, All About the Goddess. The Goddess Next Door bears all in the art studio to catch a campus stalker in this action-packed Isis series mystery. Get your copy of Isis, All About the Goddess in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers wanted me to talk about the response to the film The Sound of Freedom. Now, the film The Sound of Freedom was a film that cost $15 million and was distributed independently and went on to become one of the biggest hits of 2023. Now, The Sound of Freedom was a film that no one expected to do well in Hollywood, and when Hollywood originally owned this film back about 5 years ago, they basically put it on the shelf over at Disney Studios. Now, the film sat for a long time until the original producers got the rights to the film, and then they decided to sell the rights to the film to a Christian distributor, and the Christian distributor managed to get a limited release in theaters, and as part of that limited release, the film went on to become such a great success that other theaters, including AMC, started to go out here and start presenting the film on a regular basis. And over the last couple of weeks, The Sound of Freedom has gone from a film that went on to have a $40 million opening to becoming a $100 million blockbuster, again, all on a $15 million budget. And many in Hollywood are upset about the phenomenon revolving around the film The Sound of Freedom. And many in Hollywood are upset because they were expecting most of their superhero movies to do well at the box office, and they were also expecting many of their franchise films to also go out here and be successful. Unfortunately, many of their films, like The Flash, Indiana Jones, and The Dial of Destiny, and Elemental, have proven to be box office failures, and as those films, which were huge, big-budget tentpole films, have been flopping left and right, The Sound of Freedom has been a film that has continued to build momentum week after week, getting larger audiences with each passing week. Now, what's happening here with The Sound of Freedom is very similar to what happened to two films in 1967 and in 1971. In 1967, we had the film Born Losers, which was made by filmmaker Tom Laughlin, and this was a film that was made for under about $300,000, and it went on to become one of the biggest hits of 1967. Now, the main reason why Born Losers went on to become a great success was because it was something that resonated with audiences in America at the time, because we had the Vietnam War going on. And with the Vietnam War going on, Hollywood was completely disconnected from its audience, continuing to go out here and pump out big-budget musical, big-budget epic movies, big-budget war movies, but the audience was protesting Vietnam. We were in the middle of the civil rights movement, and we were in the middle of the feminist movement, and with all of these different movements going on, the audience was moving away from these big spectacle movies that the studios were producing, and many of those films were basically flopping at the box office. And when Tom Laughlin's Born Losers came out, it basically resonated with the audience, which was dealing with the issues presented in the film of a Vietnam vet named Billy Jack who had come home to find his entire town overrun with bikers who were rebelling from society, and a disconnected law enforcement not able to do anything about that whole situation. That was what people were seeing in their lives going on every day in modern America, and this film basically resonated with those audiences and went on to become the first blockbuster film. Because they called it a blockbuster because people were waiting around the block to go see this movie, and they were waiting around the block for hours to go see this movie because this movie basically spoke to the audience and told a story that they were experiencing at the time. And that's the main reason why Born Losers became the first blockbuster and became a cinematic classic, is because it tapped the cultural pulse of America at the time, the way The Sound of Freedom currently is tapping the cultural pulse of America. Now, the second film that basically surprised Hollywood, which was struggling at the time, was Sweet Sweetback Song, which was made by the late Melvin Van Peebles. And this film was another one that the studios were taken by surprise, because Sweet Sweetback Song basically proved that there was an audience for black movies, something Hollywood denied for years in its heyday, denying that black audiences wanted to see a film that had a all-black cast. But Melvin Van Peebles, on a small budget, was able to prove that there was an audience for black movies, and this basically opened up a gateway to many classic films of what they call the blaxploitation era, such as Shaft and many other black films, and basically was the thing that was keeping Hollywood alive, because after Melvin Van Peebles showed that there was an audience for black film, this was the thing that basically kept Hollywood on life support until the 1970s further progressed, and we got phenomenons like the Star Wars phenomenon, because Hollywood was struggling from 1967, when Tom Laughlin made Born Losers, throughout the 70s, and it was struggling because it wasn't out here listening to its audience or looking to connect with its audience. And that's the thing that is a major part of why Sound of Freedom is popular. What has happened is Hollywood executives have gotten tunnel vision regarding these superhero movies and the billion-dollar box office they have received with each film. And as they have gone out here and become more and more disconnected and gotten more tunnel vision as related to getting bigger international box office, they have basically ignored the American audience. And as they have ignored the American audience has just grown tired of the superhero movie. No matter what many in fandom say, the average everyday American is basically tired of these big budget movies, whether filled with CGI to overcompensate for their weak stories. And what they really wanted is a story about people, something that has been lost as related to Hollywood, as related to these superhero movies, since 2008, when we got the first big superhero movie of the MCU, Iron Man. Now, when Iron Man first came out and was distributed by Paramount, it was a film about Tony Stark as a person who was disconnected from people, and as he becomes Iron Man, he not only becomes a hero, but he starts to connect with the people around him. Unfortunately, what happened with the MCU and the movies of the MCU is that they went from being projects made by studios like Paramount to being made by Disney, and it was as they were made by Disney, what happened to the entire MCU is what happens to many Disney projects or many projects over time. What happens is you get these projects go on for too long, and the characters stop being people, and they start becoming caricatures of themselves. And that's what happened with the MCU over the course of the last 11 years. The MCU basically lost its way, and now that we are 15 years into the MCU, it has become completely detached and disconnected from its audience, and there's no way that it can connect with the audience because the executives are primarily focused on trying to get big box office, but not looking to go out here and tell stories about people. And because most of the audience is tired of seeing these films roll off an assembly line like a Chevrolet Citation, filled with a lot of defects and a lot of issues, they're looking for something new to go out here and watch. And that's where Sound of Freedom was able to capitalize on the market, because Sound of Freedom was a movie about people going out here and trying to help out other people. Now, the film deals with an individual who was going out here to deal with sex traffickers by going into South America to get one child and then go get their sibling. And that's a story that basically resonates with a lot of people as related to people just going out here and doing a good deed, But you have some people out here who want to say that the film is far right or the film is so-called QAnon, but that really isn't logical because if this was a film that was bought by Disney, then how can it be those things? Maybe the problem is that Hollywood is detached from its audience and doesn't really understand what films are about anymore, the same way executives were back in the late 1960s. They have become so tone deaf to the audience as they've become so obsessed with making big box office that they've forgotten that films are all about people, and oftentimes what really resonates with people is a good human story. That is something that has gotten lost as related to some people, and some people on the left have gotten so upset about the success of The Sound of Freedom and the rumors regarding it being a so-called far-right movie that they look to try to sabotage the film by doing passive-aggressive things like pulling fire alarms or going out here and turning off the air conditioning in theaters. These individuals are just so caught up in the rhetoric of social justice that they really don't understand that the audience's tastes have been changing, and they've been changing, I say, way back since 2019. Unfortunately, many were so caught up in the phenomenon of Avengers Endgame that they couldn't see that the audience was getting ready to move on. Now, I, as a guy who was a comic fan and, again, a guy who studied the entertainment industry, I could see the trends changing as far back as Captain America Civil War. And if I were running a studio, I would have been trying to put out movies about people because I could see that the audience had basically started to peak as related to the superhero movie, and that the big peak movies, Black Panther, the original Black Panther in 2018, Infinity War in 2018, and Endgame in 2019, were the peak of the superhero movie genre, but you had executives who thought it was going to go on forever, but it wasn't going to go on forever. No, that's always been the way of the business, and the smart executive always knows when to pull out or when to start investing in smaller properties. That's just how the business is, but you have a lot of people on social media wanting to talk about how this film is far right. But how can it be, again, far right if the film was made by Disney and bought by Disney 5 years ago? I mean, it wasn't far right back then, but you have people trying to put politics on this film when it was just a film that came out by a distributor who was smart enough to go out here and say, we're going to put this film on, and we're going to just go out here and put this film out because it's telling a story we want to tell. And yeah, it's a Christian distributor, but the whole thing is this Christian distributor was smart. They came at the right time, and the audience basically was looking for something new, and the audience was looking for a film where they could go out here and see a story about people. And that story about people has resonated all throughout the summer of 2023, which really resembles the summer of 1990. I remember the summer of 1990 when Hollywood thought movies like Total Recall and RoboCop 2 and Dick Tracy were going to be blockbusters, but that whole summer basically surprised everyone because in the spring we saw the success of Pretty Woman, a romantic comedy Disney again threw away and thought was going to be a failure, go on to be the biggest movie of 1990, and that was followed up by the #1 movie of the year, which was Ghost, which starred Patrick Swayze, the late Patrick Swayze, and Demi Moore, and Whoopi Goldberg in her Oscar-winning role. That was a movie, again, that many people thought was going to be a failure, but Ghost went on to become the biggest hit and opened the door for rom-coms to basically become a genre in the 1990s. I mean, yes, the genre had a big hit with When Harry Met Sally in '89, but in 1990, people wanted more rom-coms, and when Pretty Woman came out in March, it was a surprise hit, and it was followed up by Ghost, and the same thing is happening here with The Sound of Freedom. We're just seeing the audience's taste change, but we have those on the left and the right who are just upset about the success of The Sound of Freedom. Those on the left are just steamed that people are not buying what they call woke movies, and those on the right Some of them are just trying to get upset because they think that this is cementing their political position. But what we're seeing here is, again, a change in taste of people for the sound of freedom, and that's America's response. America's response is something I have observed for several years, and that is that their tastes are changing and that the audience wants something different. The audience wants something fresh and different. We want some human stories. We want to get to know some different people. People are tired of men in tights saving the world, and they want to see some real people going out here and taking on the bad guys and overcoming adversity. That's what people want as related to movies. And again, the response to The Sound of Freedom is we've got some hostile people who don't want to accept change on the left. We've got some people on the right who think this is cementing their position. But what it's really saying to everyone is that the audience wants something different. Something I have talked about in multiple videos about how the audience wants some stories about people. And I've had some people in fandom want to try to shout me down. But what they don't understand is that people want to see people. People want to spend time with people. And people want to hear stories about people. And after a while, people get tired of hearing the same story over and over again, getting the same movie with the same story again and again. That's what superhero movies have become. They've become stale and uninspired, and people just want to break from the superhero movie, and they just want to see a story about some people. They want to see a story about some people, and they want to see a story about people showing the best of humanity. That's what people want from Hollywood, and this film basically opened the door for people to see films about people, because with the writers and actor strikes currently going on, the only films being distributed will be by independent distributors like the Christian distributor who distributed Sound of Freedom, and that's going to open up the door for a different type of film, because the theaters basically have lost a lot of money due to the pandemic. The theaters are continuing to hemorrhage cash because they've been closed for so long, and the studios are not really making any more good films. Moreover, the studios really can't make any films due to the strike. And what's happening now is that this is opening the door, like it did in the 60s and the 70s, to open it up to independent filmmakers to come into the market and start to gain some audience, because the audience wants something different, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to offer something different to the audience, which has grown tired and just deaf of these superhero movies and are ready to see some stories about people and commentaries about humanity and how the world relates to the human condition. Now, this was a video requested by one of my viewers, and if you want to request a video, you can send a donation to the Cash App or the PayPal, and if I know something about that subject, I will make that video for you. And if you'd like to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, like my comic John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic at lulu.com right now by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my books on the SJS Direct imprint, which feature positive images of black people, like the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, the Black Goth novels in the Spinsterella trilogy, my Black sorority novel, The Thetas, and my vampire novel, Eternal Night, and my business novel, A Recipe for Success, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess. The Goddess Next Door takes on the threat of a deadly digital diva driven to destroy the world in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, featuring a bonus pin-up and the other 2 books in the Cyber Goddess saga at online booksellers everywhere today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.